Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Jnana Timirandasya Jnanjana Shalakaya Chakshurum Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Shri Chaitanya Manovishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Darati Swapadantikam Vandeyam Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamsha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sagana Raghunatam Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Paridana Saitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sagana Lalita Shri Vishakhan Vitamscha Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanchakalpa Tarubhyascha Kripa Sindhu Bevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo 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 Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Niti Namine Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pacharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadara Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, everyone. So, welcome to our continued study of Bhagavad Gita. We'll be completing chapter 12 today and completing the second module of the Bhagavad Gita. These verses will conclude chapter 12 and also conclude this middle section of the Bhagavad Gita, which has been speaking exclusively on devotional service. And we've heard many wonderful aspects of devotional service, starting from chapter 7, chapter 8, 9, 10, 11, and now 12. And these 8 verses on pure devotional service, Krishna will speak. And Krishna is going to establish that this is the best process for self-realization. We have heard, and there have been many different processes discussed in Bhagavad Gita, but this is the best. And so, one may wonder how to know if one has achieved pure devotional service. So Krishna is telling us here in these verses 35 transcendental qualities or qualifications of the pure devotee. So these are internal symptoms that can help indicate where we are in our process of pure devotional service. And the core of these qualifications, as we'll see, the heart of the pure devotee is that they are fully surrendered to Krishna, and their mind and intelligence is fixed on Krishna. So, and Krishna concludes these verses with a very sweet statement. And he says, such a devotee of mine is very dear to me. We can appreciate how amazing it is to become dear to somebody great, right? When someone is so extraordinary, when we meet, our spiritual master, we hope to become very dear to him. Or, when we meet, imagine, you met Srila Prabhupada, how it would be great to become dear to him. Well, what, sort of accomplishment one could achieve when one could become very dear to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So Krishna is giving us these very powerful and transcendental qualities that we'll discuss of his pure devotees that are very dear to Krishna. So we'll talk not only about the qualities, but also how to acquire them, how to awaken them from within. Maybe that is most important, right? Because as we see these, we may think, wow, I've got a long way to go. But don't worry, Prabhupada gives us the fail-proof way to awaken them, right? So let's start with verse number 13 and 14. They are presented together. One who is not envious, but is a kind friend to all living entities, who does not think himself a proprietor and is free from false ego, who is equal in both happiness and distress, who is tolerant, who is always satisfied, self-controlled, and engaged in devotional service with determination, his mind and intelligence fixed on me, such a devotee of mine is very dear to me. So the overall theme of these two verses, Prabhupada explains, is that a devotee is never disturbed in any circumstance. They're never disturbed. So this is a good overall indication for us. How often we are becoming disturbed. That can tell us, well, maybe our surrender to Krishna is not yet fully complete. So this is a good, broad, overarching indication. And Srila Prabhupada says that right in the third line. A pure devotee is never disturbed in any circumstance. So this is the overall thing. So non-envious. We have seen this envy presented in different ways in the Bhagavad Gita. Arjuna's qualification to hear has been because he was not envious. We will hear about it coming up as being a gateway to the hellish conditions. And so we are hearing a lot about envy. So non-envious is very important. And Srila Baladev Vidyabhushan speaks about this and explains it in such a way that when a person hates me, that is because of my own past karma, the matured reaction of my karma specifically, because Krishna is the ultimate sanctioner, the ultimate controller. So he must be sanctioning this hatred towards me. Whatever is being done, it must be sanctioned. So the devotee does not reciprocate back. Right? So when someone troubles us, one does not become envious or angry or hate that person. They know they are troubling only because of some past misaction I have done. Right? So they are just the instrument of my karma, my past karma. So we say, don't hate the instrument of our sin, hate the sin. Prabhupada used to quote, from Christianity, a similar statement, not exactly that. So one doesn't become the enemy of one's enemy. That is the overall understanding of this nature. And the mood of the devotee, actually, is that one prays to uplift that instrument of our past reactions, that enemy, thinking, their consciousness also maybe has become disturbed, and let's pray to Krishna that they can also purify from such things. And we see amazing examples of this. And one of the most amazing examples illustrated here on this slide, Haridas Thakur. He was being beaten in 22 marketplaces, yet he was praying for them. He was praying so intensely for them that the Sudarshan Chakra that was called by Krishna himself to destroy those people would not come, only because Haridas Thakur was praying for them. So we have a great example of this. Prahlad Maharaj, being tormented by his father, he never became angry or envious of his father. In fact, he prayed for him. And when Lord Nrsingadev pressed upon him a benediction, Prahlad Maharaj simply said, "Deliver my father." So, the pure devotee is a friend truly to all living entities. Right? There's some other qualities we see here. We won't discuss them all. If you are interested in hearing more of these, we've given some discussion on these verses, and you can find them there in more detail, but we'll cover just some highlights. tolerant, always satisfied, self-controlled, equal in happiness and distress. So you can kind of put these all into, a similar bucket. That the mood of the devotee is always satisfied because they take whatever is given by Krishna is perfect. They don't get bothered if certain needs are met or not met. They're fully surrendered on Krishna's mercy, and they know with great faith and comfort that Krishna is going to provide everything. He knows what is best for us, and everything that we get is best for us. Never too much, never too little. So there's no need to lament or celebrate. If Krishna desires I should suffer, okay, it must be best for me. Whatever comes by the grace of Krishna, the pure devotee is happy. So he doesn't endeavor so much to achieve things with great difficulty. He takes what comes, he puts forth his effort, but he doesn't stress out about the outcomes. So this, we see of several of these qualities. Always satisfied, is tolerant, is equal in happiness and distress, right? And the meaning of equal in happiness and distress is important. That this is relating to the body. This happiness and distress are only pains and pleasures of the body. So, because I am not this body, Prabhupada explains in a purport, one is not disturbed by the pains or pleasures of the body. One is equal in both. The other knows, I am not the body. Just like if there's some difficulty with the car, the driver is not so disturbed. Yeah, he may attend to it and fix it, but he's not emotionally disturbed. Oh, my car is broken. No, it is what it is. Let's go fix it. But the emotional energy is invested fully in spiritual life. So not happiness and distress, again, is not that one becomes emotionless or stone-like. No. But that one does not invest their emotional energy in material affairs. And we have talked about being equipoised several times before, but it's nice to hear. Krishna says, one who is fixed. What does fixed mean? Prabhupada again, no one can sway him or her from the path of bhakti. They're so understood. Their intelligence is very steady. Their senses are fully controlled. They are fully determined. They cannot be swayed by any temptation. The pure devotee does not have any risk of falling down because they are fully controlled. When suffering, how does the devotee feel? Oh, I deserved so much more due to my past karma. But Krishna is so kind. He is giving me just a little bit. I deserve more, but he's giving me just a little bit. So the devotee remains calm and patient, even amidst the harshest of difficulties. And we see this. And again, an example of Haridas Thakur. Always satisfied. What does that mean? Now, these are important traits in devotional service. Why? Because if we are not satisfied, we'll become disturbed. So one is always satisfied, always, because they know Krishna's plan is always perfect. Our plan is not. But when one has full faith in the plan of Krishna, they're always satisfied. They know everything is happening according to his will. And so when one has this, then they're steady and can focus on their bhakti very intensely. And we remain calm and peaceful in the midst of all things that may come. We see, that sometimes when someone chastises us, someone exhibits envy towards us, or we experience envy towards somebody, or something doesn't go right, our mind becomes so preoccupied with such things that we can't concentrate on Krishna. And the other side is also true. When something extraordinary happens, something great happens, there's such happiness and exaltation on the material platform. Big bonus, or, bought a new house, this, that, or the other. Again, on a material platform, not on a spiritual platform, but on the material platform. Then again, one cannot concentrate their mind on Krishna, and one is disturbed. So this always being satisfied, knowing Krishna's plan is perfect, is a key ingredient to be fixed, steady, undeviated in devotional service. Right? So these are very beautiful qualities. Prabhupada says in the purport, such a standard of devotional service is undoubtedly very rare. So now we may think, wow, Prabhupada said it's rare. What do we do? What do we do? Well, he says, but a devotee becomes situated in that stage by following the regular principles of devotional service. So how to acquire these qualities? We simply have to awaken them from within by the regular process of devotional service. So yes, it is rare, but it is very achievable by the mercy of Srila Prabhupada, by the mercy of Guru, and by the mercy of Krishna. This can happen. Not only it can, it will happen. Because actually these qualities are the natural intrinsic nature of every living entity. This is who we actually are. But due to conditioning, these qualities have become covered. And so how to remove the covering? Cheto darpana marjanam baba mahadavagya navapanam. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu says, just chant the holy names of the Lord. So we have the tool to acquire these very rare qualities. So if one feels, please digest this statement. If one feels these qualities are impossible, they are too far for me, it means we don't have faith in the holy names. Because that is the potency of the holy names, to bring out these natural qualities within us. And that's why one of the offenses is to consider the glories of chanting Hare Krishna to be imagination. Right? So we should have full faith in the potency of the holy names and the mercy of Guru and Krishna. That by doing so, these very rare qualities undoubtedly will become manifest within us if we follow the regular principles of devotional service. Right? So as we get through these, don't become unmotivated. Again, the overall theme of these two verses, devotee is never disturbed. And so we can check ourselves in such a case. And when we become disturbed, remember back to these verses. Wait, I should not be disturbed. And then just think about why I should not be disturbed in the midst of whatever difficulty or, happiness we may be experiencing. Think back to these verses and understand why and how one should not be disturbed. That is the overall theme, as we'll see. And if we do, these qualities make one very, very dear to the Supreme Lord. Okay? 15. He by whom no one is put into difficulty, and who is not disturbed by anyone, who is equipoised in happiness and distress, fear and anxiety, is very dear to me. So Krishna says, put no one in difficulty. One is kind to everyone. Seeing everyone is part and parcel of Krishna, even someone who puts us into difficulty, one does not reciprocate. Just tolerate and pray for them. Don't putting one into difficulty, sometimes we think that is, by physical harm. Yes, that is one aspect. But the most powerful way in which we put somebody to difficulty is with the tongue, with our words. A slap will sting for a few moments, but some misplaced words will hurt for potentially a lifetime. So when we say, don't put somebody into difficulty, it means not just physically, but also emotionally. And that is the mood of a devotee. He is very kind to all, even his own enemy. Okay? We see, fearless, right? Who's equipoised in happiness and distress and in fear and anxiety. How to become fearless and free of anxiety? Equipoised in the fearfulest of situations? Faith in Krishna. Prahlad Maharaj sitting in the pit of snakes. He was thinking, if Krishna wants these snakes to bite me, they'll bite me. And if he doesn't, they won't. What can I do? I have faith in Krishna's plan, he was saying. So any fear we have actually is an incomplete faith in Krishna's plan being perfect. So when we have some fear and anxiety, just remember back. Krishna's plan is perfect. Somebody gets sick, we get into an accident, this, that, or the other. Things are going to happen. One remains fully equipoised. And devotee has full confidence in the midst of even those difficulties. No fear. And not disturbed by anyone. We talked a little bit about that. Not disturbed by anyone. Haridas Thakur. So many people were giving disturbances. The king sent a very beautiful prostitute to try to disturb his chanting. Was not disturbed. Those who are beating him in the marketplace were not disturbed. And so, when Krishna says they're very dear to me, how dear Haridas Thakur was to Chaitanya Mahaprabhu? That when he left this mortal world, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu personally took his body onto his lap, began to sing and dance kirtan, took to the ocean, personally bathed his body, and then set him in samadhi. So we have wonderful proof of how dear these qualities make one to Krishna. That Krishna himself performed this very beautiful pastime we read about in Chaitanya Charitamrita. It's illustrated here. Srila Prabhupada comments about the materialist mindset. Right? He says that the materialists become happy. I'm not quoting exactly, but they become happy when they get something and sad when they don't. When somebody else has something that they want, they become sad. When an enemy comes to take away their possessions, they become fearful, full of anxiety. Right? So the complete opposite. The devotee remains calm. As Prabhupada says, material circumstances cannot move him. He's on a higher platform, fully surrendered to the plan of Krishna. Right? So we see in these last three verses this commonality of equipoised. Right? So we see that is one of the major themes. And sometimes a little bit of repetition we'll talk about here in a moment. But this equipoised, how to become it. It's such a powerful trait because it lets one become fully focused on what is really important, and that is Krishna consciousness, our spiritual activities. So one must have faith and know that all the ups and downs, it's just the nature of the material world. It's going to happen. But one should elevate to a higher platform. Right? And one doesn't have this kind of possessive spirit. This is my doing. I'm in control. No, one understands. Krishna is all-knowing. He's all-loving and all-powerful. Everything is happening under his sanction. And he will provide for us what is best because we're very dear to Krishna. Right? He has already said he'll carry what we lack and preserve what we have. So one has to have faith in those statements. And then one becomes equipoised. They don't become disturbed in whatever material circumstance they are. But again, this equipoised doesn't mean emotionless. One is fully enthused and full of ecstatic emotion in devotional life, in spiritual activities. But one is equipoised to the material circumstances. So one does not let the ups and downs of the material world disturb one's devotional service. One is not going to let the calamities of COVID disturb one's consciousness of praying to Krishna. But when one is engaged in devotional service, they are full of happiness, full of ecstasy. So this is equipoise does not mean to become stone-like, but it simply means to ignore, to set aside the material circumstances, having faith in Krishna's plan, having faith in Krishna. So this mood of surrender is there. So something bad happens to us. It is good, burning past karma and helping us surrender more to Krishna. Right? Okay. 16. My devotee who is not dependent on the ordinary course of activities, who is pure, expert, without cares, free from all pains, and not striving for some result, is very dear to me. So without cares, Prabhupada talks about in the purport that a devotee never takes the part of a particular party. We are in election season. So it doesn't take sides in this politics and arguments. It's always focused just on Krishna. No mundane matters. No material cares. Doesn't mean a devotee does not care about others. He cares about others as part and parcel of Krishna. So he's very caring. But he does not care whether somebody is tall, short, black, white, green, blue. He does not look at the material designations. A devotee is very caring for each and every living entity, each and every spirit soul. Not just in the human race, but in all life forms. So a devotee is full of care, but doesn't care about the material circumstances. Right? So that's what without cares means. Not striving for some result. One word, does that make us lazy? No. One is not looking for their own results, their own gains. Simply working for Krishna under the guidance of Guru. So that this does not mean one becomes lazy. Actually, one becomes more enthusiastic, more determined, because we're working for a higher purpose. Put 100% effort, but don't struggle. If it doesn't happen, okay, that is Krishna's plan. If it happens, great, that is Krishna's plan. So we put 100% effort, but let the results come to Krishna. Be determined by Krishna. So if Krishna wants it, it's his will, it'll happen, and if not, it won't. So, often we do our service, but we are motivated by the result. To feel good, somebody has praised our service, or, giving this or that, and so many people are coming, or so many people are enjoying this, kirtanam singing, or this, or that, we have this desire. So we should try to think back to this not striving for some result, simply striving to please Krishna. But it does not mean one becomes lazy. One should be fully enthusiastic. And this mood of not striving for some result is very powerful in one service in particular, book distribution. When we go out for book distribution, our satisfaction, our pleasure should be not in how many books were distributed, but simply how many hours I spent in that service. Because whether the books are distributed or not, that is between Krishna and them. We are simply a small part of that process. But our feeling should be, today I was able to go out for 3 hours. But often we focus on how many books. And thus we become sometimes enthused and sometimes discouraged. But we remember, it is up to Krishna. We are simply doing a small part to help him. So this not striving for some result is very powerful to help us remain steady in devotional service, but also very enthused. Just not become to the point that, it's Krishna's plan, I don't have to do anything. No, that is not. Expert, Krishna says. So we should become expert in the philosophy of Krishna consciousness. We should become fully versed on what is right, what is wrong. We should become very learned. Prabhupada was so expert in everything, even in how to manage the material world. He was so expert in everything, and how the material world could be used in the service of Krishna. Right? So one should become, expert in everything. We could talk about Prabhupada's expertise for hours. They're so inspiring. So, Prabhupada talks about, when a devotee is willing to struggle and take the anxiety. We talk about not striving and not over-endeavoring. But a devotee is willing to struggle for Krishna, willing to take on all kinds of anxiety for Krishna. And Prabhupada certainly did that. He struggled, but he was struggling not for his own, accomplishments, but for the accomplishment of Krishna. So a devotee is very willing and enthusiastic to struggle and sometimes even come into anxiety for the purpose of pleasing Krishna. Okay? So, Prabhupada talks about that, right? And so, how to be free from all pains. We have pains in the body, right? But those absorb our consciousness when we are on the bodily platform. All the pains we have, they're on the bodily platform, never on the soul. Right? So one should try to elevate. When the car is in pain, the driver doesn't feel the same pain. At least they should not. So when our body is in pain, we should not become absorbed in that. We're simply living in this city of 9 gates, as we have heard previously. So these are all, again, very beautiful qualities that Krishna is explaining. 17. One who neither rejoices nor grieves nor laments, who neither laments nor desires, and who renounces both auspicious and inauspicious things. Such a devotee is very dear to me. Again, no rejoicing, no grieving. Material happiness and distress doesn't move the emotion of the devotee. Always spiritually engaged. No laments or desires. Doesn't worry or want anything. If it comes, great. If not, no problem. So even this lamenting, meaning, this hating something. I don't want this. This is bad. That's a form of attachment. It's negative attachment. Right? It consumes our mind. So this is, important. Sometimes when we are in a process of, sometimes maybe when we are in preaching activities, we become happy when many people come and lament when no one comes. That must not be our mood. Simply enjoy the discussion of Krishna Katha. And know Krishna is in control. Our duty, again, just like the books, is just to serve, not the result. And this is key to free the mind from being fixed on all these things that we cannot control anyways. Right? And this is what a pure devotee does. And thus they're able to remain steady and enthusiastic in all circumstances. 18 and 19. One who is equal to friends and enemies, who is equipoised in honor and dishonor, heat and cold, happiness and distress, fame and infamy, who is always free from contaminating association, always silent, satisfied with anything, who does not care for any residence, who is fixed in knowledge, and who is engaged in devotional service. Such a person is very dear to me. So, Krishna is saying, equal to friends and enemy, honor and dishonor, heat and cold, insults or praise. Very difficult if one is on the bodily platform. Very easy if one is self-realized. Because all of this, friends and enemies, honor and dishonor, heat and cold, it's all on the bodily platform. The car example is just a great way for us to visualize this. When the car is hit by a stone driving down the street, the driver doesn't feel pain unless they're attached to that car, overly attached. So similarly, what happens to the body? One should not let affect the emotions. If we think, easier said than done, yeah, maybe. But we have the simple process to make the difficult, the very rare, very achievable. And that is chanting, devotional service. Again, this doesn't mean one becomes callous, stops caring about others. No. Actually, one has great care and love for everyone. But again, one becomes not emotionally tied to the material circumstances. Silent. Are we breaking that now? We are speaking here? No. Silent means silent on all material affairs. One doesn't speak any nonsense, prajalpa. Only speaking on Krishna. That is the meaning of silence. And we see this in Nectar of Instruction. does not care for any residence, right? Living under a tree or in a palatial, building. The same. And Srila Prabhupada was such an extraordinary example of it. He lived in a simple office building without even a bathroom in his living quarters. And he was satisfied. Later, when, wonderful temples were built, he had opulent, quarters. But it was not, attached to any of it. Simply attached to serving Krishna. So, these qualities that we are discussing here, there's so many. They're a sign of the pure devotion. These qualities are what are manifest in the pure devotee. So, and Prabhupada writes in the purport that the devotee must have these qualifications. They're not optional. Right? So, the repetition, Prabhupada says, we may find some repetition in the description of the qualifications of a devotee. But this is just to emphasize the fact that a devotee must acquire all of these qualifications. So don't think, I can't. No, we must acquire these qualifications. But we must know the process to acquire them. And that is a process Prabhupada has taught us from coming from Guru Parampara, our sadhana bhakti. So these qualifications are a must. They're not optional. Without these qualities, one cannot become a pure devotee. Right? And these qualities define one's purity, not how long one has been in devotional service, how many verses they have memorized, how eloquently they can narrate some pastime. That is not the qualification. These are the qualifications. So, we have the clear understanding and the formula. Right? And again, Srila Prabhupada says how to develop these qualities, taking to Krishna consciousness. Devotional service will automatically bring out these qualities from within. They are natural, the intrinsic qualities of the spirit soul, being pure, part and parcel of Krishna. So we don't have to endeavor to acquire these. We simply have to awaken them from within by the process of devotional service. And that should be the ultimate confidence builder, because they're already within us. We simply have to bring them out. Finally, Krishna says now, those who follow this imperishable path of devotional service and who completely engage themselves with faith, making me the supreme goal, are very, very dear to me. So Arjuna had asked in the beginning, what was better, the personal worship or the impersonal worship? Krishna now has explained very explicitly, very clearly, the supremacy of devotional service, how dear the pure devotee is. So this bhakti, it is the highest and best of all processes of self-realization. Even better than the perfected jnani, even better than the perfected Ashtanga yogi. And thus, Krishna says, very, very. He says very twice. This is to distinguish bhakti, pure bhakti, from all other paths. Others may be very dear, but not very, very dear. So Krishna is using a very sweet way to truly solidify in our hearts. This is the path. Our faith must develop in this process. Because when our faith increases, then our surrender to Krishna increases. And when we surrender to Krishna, we know He reciprocates. Ye yata mam prapadyante tam sataiva bhajamyaham. He reciprocates according to the degree of our surrender. But it takes faith. So when our faith, we surrender, and then Krishna reciprocates. And that reciprocation brings out these qualities and increases our faith, which further increases our surrender, which further brings out Krishna's reciprocation. And ultimately, this state of pure devotional service. So during this month of Kartik, we can pray to Krishna. Krishna, please give me faith in you and help me surrender to you. Then I know I can come to the perfected stage and become very dear to you. So Krishna, in answering Arjuna's question, has clearly said pure devotional service is the best. Better than the impersonal state of worship. It is the best of all. And Prabhupada explains in the purport how this pure devotion happens. So I just wanted to read several lines from this purport. It's very nice. In other words, in this chapter, it is described. So now Prabhupada is talking about how this happens. So let's see how it happens. In this chapter, it is decided that through good association, one develops attachment for pure devotional service, and thereby accepts a bona fide spiritual master, and from him begins to hear and chant and observe the regulative principles of devotional service with faith, attachment, and devotion, and thus becomes engaged in the transcendental service of the Lord. This path is recommended in this chapter. Therefore, there is no doubt that devotional service is the only absolute path for self-realization, for the attainment of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The impersonal conception of the Supreme Absolute Truth, as described in this chapter, is recommended only up to the time one surrenders himself for self-realization. In other words, as long as one does not have the chance to associate with a pure devotee, the impersonal conception may be beneficial. In the impersonal conception of the Absolute Truth, one works without fruitive results, meditates, and cultivates knowledge to understand spirit and matter. This is necessary as long as one is not in the association of a pure devotee. Fortunately, if one develops directly a desire to engage in Krishna consciousness in pure devotional service, he does not need to undergo step-by-step improvements in spiritual realization. Devotional service, as described in the middle 6 chapters of Bhagavad Gita, is more congenial. One need not bother about the materials to keep the body and soul together, because by the grace of the Lord, everything is carried out automatically. A beautiful purport by Srila Prabhupada to end this final section of the middle section of the Bhagavad Gita. So let us pray that we can have faith in the plan of Krishna, surrender to him, and become very, very dear to him through the attachment to the regulative principles of devotional service, following the instructions of the pure devotee, the spiritual master, and this will happen in short time, not long time, and will make the rare very accessible by the power, not of our own selves, but the power of the mercy of Guru and Krishna in the process of devotional service. Okay? Thank you very much. Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Ananta Koti Vaishnavinda ki. Any questions, comments, discussion today?
Hare Krishna Prabhuji. Dandavat pranams, and thank you always for eloquently taking us through this kingdom law knowledge. Thank you so much. I have 2 questions.
Yes.
One specifically to verse 17,
Yes.
where it says, one who renounces both auspicious and inauspicious things. So, what of renouncing auspicious things? Because wouldn't that be what we want to attach to by detaching from things that are inauspicious?
Yeah, so there are materially auspicious things. So when we think about in the Vedas, the karma kanda processes, right? So those are considered good karmic activities versus bad karmic activities. So those are in the auspicious rituals we see that one also detaches from, because the motive for those are to acquire some material gain separate from Krishna. So when you're speaking of here, these are both the auspicious and inauspicious. It means the good karmic activities and the bad, because ultimately they both are binding. So that is what.
So materially auspicious and good karma, not akarma.
Exactly,
essentially.
exactly. The auspiciousness of bhakti, one is very attached to. Correct.
Okay, okay. Thank you so much for this clarification, Prabhu.
Yeah.
And now, what is the hardest for me personally to understand? Um, you know, being equal opposed to those who are friends and those who are enemies.
Yeah.
I understand that this is a high bar, obviously. And I understand, to be free from things like insults or reputation or things like this. This is all false ego. So when we, step aside from our false ego, it becomes easier to just, dismiss these kind of things. A saintly bar would be to be beaten in the marketplace and to be praying for your enemies. This is even above that. This is even more difficult for me to understand.
Yeah.
What is almost nearly impossible for me to understand is if someone seeks your destruction, your death, your life, danger to your family, when an enemy is coming at you fatally, how can this be understood? I know there's Vedic injunctions for protecting from weapons and poisons and certain things. Someone tries to harm you and your family, but how can we understand this problem?
Yeah, no, that's a great practical application. So, one doesn't walk into a pit of snakes and thinking, oh, if the snakes want to bite me, they're going to bite me. So one doesn't knowingly put themselves in danger, saying, oh, Krishna's plan is supreme. Because now we are now invoking Krishna's protection of us. We are consuming him. When the devotee is very wise and very careful not to put themselves into dangerous situations to require Krishna to come and save him. Right? So the devotee's mind says, I don't want to disturb Krishna. Of course, it's not a disturbance to Krishna, but the devotee, out of their love, thinks not to put themselves in dangerous positions to consume the protection of Krishna. So that is how the devotee thinks that. So now, but to get to your specific question, so one, there are, as you said, injunctions. In the Manu Samhita, it explains, the details of how, when one must take action, when one must become, protect and fight against an aggressor. But even in that mood of fighting, one does not become angry at the enemy. So one is fighting to protect the family, but not to destroy the enemy. And there's a difference. In military training, the really well-trained soldier is fighting not to kill the enemy in the front of them, but to protect those behind him. That is the mindset. So in the understanding here, like if there is some harm to coming, yeah, we have to protect ourselves. We have to, protect ourselves from that imminent harm. So we do our part, and we know Krishna's plan ultimately is supreme. But even in that, one doesn't become, one understands this person's attacking me out of their own conditioning, their own false ego. And so one actually prays for them, but still at the same time, one protects themselves. And we saw this in many examples, during Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur's time, when he was on parikrama in Navadvip. Some rogues came and they tried to assassinate him. Right? And the police told him. He didn't think, okay, let me just, jump in front of their bullets if that's Krishna's. No. He took action to protect himself. To, avert that situation. There was physical harm being threatened to him. Srila Prabhupada was attacked in one of his living quarters. And he, took the appropriate action. So, one works to extricate themselves, to protect themselves and their family, because they understand they're also vehicles to serving Krishna. So this doesn't mean, that we become, that we don't use our expert intelligence to separate ourselves from that danger, so to protect ourselves. But again, in doing so, one becomes, one understands that this, whoever is doing this hatred, they're also conditioned, and ultimately just an instrument of my past karma. So, and that's how Arjuna, remember, Arjuna is being instructed to fight this war. He's being instructed to fight. He doesn't want to, but Krishna is saying, no, you have to fight. So there is the appropriate use of violence. But it must be done, not according to one's ego, but according to Shastra. Is that okay?
Yes, Prabhu. Hare Krishna. Excellent. Thank you so much.
Hare Krishna. Thank you. Hare Krishna. Dandavad.
My husband, thank you to Nitya Krishna Mataji. 2 years before, I have gone through chapter 6, 12, text 16 to 20 multiple times because I was teaching to my daughter. So I feel so happy now. Today, almost class is Mataji class. I did like memorize all 16, 20 years before, so I'm very comfortable with it. Thank you very much, Mataji. I got only one question, Prabhu.
Yes.
Because we are in the path of bhakti, we try to follow the non-violence and all those things properly. But what happens is, like, when we go to shop, we pick a packet, and our tendency is, it is kind of basic with respect to lamentation and disturbance, but our tendency is just we pick the packet, we check the ingredients. Let me see the ingredients. Then is something with the no, keep it back.
Yeah.
Okay. So, how do we understand this? Because most of the items now, even though they are saying the ingredients like naturally organic extracted, but the ingredients have been extracted from the animals. Some plants basis, some animal basis. Those are become a standardization today and tomorrow. So how do we understand it? Because we are getting disturbed with that. Because I have seen that the milk what we are consuming every day is really not real milk.
Yeah.
I went through so many, this one I can't explain in the form now.
Yeah.
But it is a little disturbing for me.
Yeah.
From a couple of weeks when I know all these details about how they do this milk processing.
Yeah. So Prabhupada has spoken about this and given us some very good instructions here, because yes, the bhoga that we are acquiring, it comes under very different circumstances in different situations. He spoke very specifically about milk, and they said, Prabhupada, this milk has fish oil in it. What to do? But Prabhupada took a very practical approach. He said we must offer milk sweets to Krishna.
Yeah.
So and he said then now of course at the same time he was trying to establish farming communities where cow protection would reign supreme, and as by establishing this varnashram dharma, we could again establish the availability of these pure products. But in the absence of those, his instruction was, we must offer milk to Krishna, even if it's not pure. So we attempt and work as hard as we can, try to get the pure milk, but if it's not available, we should still offer it, because Krishna enjoys milk sweets. And there is some further understanding that even that cow who is suffering, at least some value, they get great benefit because their byproduct, that milk, is being offered to Krishna. So now again, the counter to that is, well, by buying we are creating demand, and demand leads to supply, and so there's a again, there becomes a practical issue. When it comes to other things, ultimately, life subsists on life. We know that, right? Krishna says that. But we subsist on the lower forms of life, the plant lives, and by offering to Krishna, it becomes purified of all of the contaminants. So, ingredients that are coming from other plant life, is again within the realm of what because patram pushpam phalam toyam, right? So, we try our best to acquire the purest of foodstuffs, the things that are not, adulterated and modified and processed in such a way that it makes it, frankly, also unhealthy. Because again, the healthy body is a means to serving Krishna. Right? So, but as Kali Yuga progresses, the quality of foodstuffs will deteriorate. It's already happening, and it will continue to happen. So, to the extent we can, work together and create, these wonderful communities that Srila Prabhupada wanted, where we can acquire, but it's limited. So we remain as practical as we can. We do the best we can with the circumstance in front of us, and that was always Srila Prabhupada's instructions. Is we have to be practical and strict at the same time. It's okay.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji, Dhanavad Pranam, all good to Srila Prabhupada Guru. Thank you so much, Prabhuji. We are towards the last leg now. And thank you for all the wonderful class discussions we've been having. I had a question, but it's not related to the qualities of the pure devotee, which we're talking about. But as we talked about, the elections around the corner. And this has always been in my mind, that how much should we know about what's going on in this life, like in this world? Like, we talk about these elections, and then we have the voting. We are supposed to be as responsible citizens. If you're a citizen, you should go out and vote. If you're going out and voting, you should know about each of these agenda of all these people, right? In the state and in the center and all that. So, as devotees, what if we don't do? Should we just live in this thing, in the doing our service and that, and then we just forget about all those things completely? I'm completely okay with that, but is that the right stand? What should be our mood? If you could just enlighten us. Sorry, but this has been like in my mind.
In these things, the important thing is not to become over-absorbed, because there's no end, at least somewhat practically, to how deep you can go into these topics. But by doing so, we become completely deviated from what is really important, right? So even our understanding in these matters, should be constructed in a way that is understood how this is facilitating my devotional service. So if we're thinking of, politics, okay, well, is there a particular politician that might be more favorable to the propagation of Krishna consciousness? Maybe I can understand who might be more favorable, who might be more, providing policies that can help propagate Krishna consciousness. So we can look at it in that light. I know, my own spiritual master, Holiness Gopal Krishna Maharaj, he talks about, in preaching, one should be aware of the worldly affairs so that they can connect to those. Otherwise, people will think you're aloof. And so to be able to connect to those, and Srila Prabhupada did this amazingly well, right? He would have the early disciples. They would speak to him about Socrates and Plato and all these philosophers and different things that were happening. Because Prabhupada wanted to be able to speak to those intellectualists and connect whatever they had heard to Krishna. So his learning of that knowledge was not to satisfy his curiosity, but simply as a means to propagate Krishna consciousness. So he did not remain aloof to the Cold War. He was not aloof to the arms race, putting a man on the moon, all these current events that were taking place during Srila Prabhupada's time. He was fully aware of them. His awareness and understanding of them was dovetailed into how this can help propagate Krishna consciousness. So, if we have some opportunity, then we should do it. But the thing we should avoid is the over-absorption in that, and the understanding, and then the real, again, when we get into the point of consuming our consciousness and our things. So, go do your duty. You have a right, and you have an opportunity. Yeah, go do it. But, in context of the big picture. So that is how, we can understand it.
Thank you, Prabhuji. Thank you so much.
Hare Krishna. Any other questions? Sounds like there's one online, yes?
How to practice on equipoising the distress at the time of difficulty, Prabhuji?
Who's asking?
Itiranjan.
Okay. So how to practice equipoised in the moments of distress. So like anything, practice makes perfect. So don't expect to be perfect the first time, the second time, or maybe the 10th time. So often, initially, in the moment of distress, it's hard to be equipoised. So, but what we do, after the thing is settled, we can reflect back. I should not have become distressed. Why? Krishna's plan is perfect. I am part and parcel of Krishna. I am not this body. Taking this on, even after the fact. And what is the benefit of evaluating that situation after the fact? You can think, wait a minute, it's gone. The point is to keep building the consciousness so that each time we face distress, we get closer and closer to being able to be equipoised at the moment of distress. Because at the moment of distress, it is difficult. But if we continue to practice and understanding this knowledge, becoming very expert in it, then at that moment of distress, soon enough, we'll also be equipoised. But one must have and develop the strong faith in these statements, right? Because if some calamity is occurring, unless we have full faith in Krishna, they'll not be equipoised, right? So we continue to practice our devotional service, continue to chant very nicely, receive the mercy of Guru and Krishna, and purify from these conditioning, and it will happen. And that's the main thrust. And the practical tip I like to give is, the next time we become distressed in something, step back after the fact and evaluate it. Talk to you, how I could have been equipoised during that moment. And by doing so, by that type of practice, slowly those habits will form. Again, ultimately by the purification and the chanting, but in this practice that will become more prevalent. So that's how we become equipoised, and don't expect it to happen overnight, right? It's a difficult thing to do. But again, by the mercy of Guru and Krishna, it will happen. Okay. Any other questions or comments? Okay. So if not, thank you very much, everyone. And so we'll speak in a couple of weeks. Enjoy Kartik Mas, and we'll just pray we can continue to develop our faith in Krishna, so that these transcendental qualities will once again emerge from all of us by taking the shelter of the holy names and the instructions of Guru and Krishna. Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda ki jai. Hare Krishna.